It's not sensitive to torque. You know, an idiot can get in there and work on it, and whether you have it tight or unless it's mechanically loose, it's okay. They're not sensitive to torque, but they're also not really good for, you know, long periods and high mileage, because they dent. The little balls dent, and the races they ride in dent, and then everything starts getting rougher and looser, and then the steering head will be loose, and that's one thing that causes the bike to wobble. So we do recommend changing the bearings out to a tapered roller bearing. Tapered roller bearings are so strong you can crash the bike and the bearing's not going to be damaged. It's something you do one time. But the only drawback to them is that they're very sensitive to torque. So when they need to actually be mechanically torqued expertly and correctly, and then they'll work great. And if, you know, if they're properly installed, it'll last, you know, the life of the bike. Another gizmo we recommend highly, and there's, you know, 2 fences on that, fork brace for the Goldwing. Fork brace on a Honda Goldwing, you put a fork brace on, if you can't feel it in the parking lot, I say you're dead, you're a ghost. You're not even alive driving the bike. It's so, the Honda Goldwing, you can walk to your bike if you don't have a fork brace, grab the bar and go like this, and you can actually get the wheel to flap in the opposite direction of the handlebar. And what that is the forks are flexing, they're twisting in the clamps. Now, these forks are very thick-walled. Honda's made them strong in that aspect, but they still are able to flex. And so, at parking lot speed, wobble's really the only word you can think of, but it's more like a wag. You know, you ever feel that feeling of riding through a parking lot slowly while you're just turning around, and you feel the wheel wiggling in the opposite direction, you know, against you while you're trying to turn slowly. That's just the forks going like this. Now, you put a fork brace on, that's gone the instant you put it on, 90% of the way, and you can feel it immediately. The next place a fork brace is beneficial is on the freeway. Same thing if you don't have a fork brace. Next time, if you're on a freeway tomorrow, take the bars and move them. You'll be surprised how far you can move the handlebars on your Goldwing without the bike moving. It'll keep going straight. And it's not the bars flexing or anything. You can actually look down at the top crown, watch this bolt, and you'll see those bolts move back and forth ½ an inch, and the bike will keep going straight. Now, so what this does is, if you have to steer quickly out of the way, something comes up on the freeway, a hole, a tire, you know, some debris, or, you know, an animal, I mean, you know, whatever might come at you, you have to wind the bike up. It's not going to react quickly. There's no speed of the reaction. You have to actually push quite a bit to get it to move. When you put a fork brace on, they're instantly more responsive. Not in a negative way, not like twitchy or scary. It's just when you move, when you think, it goes when you're thinking. So I think Charles was one of our skeptics of that, and we did back-to-back, and just because it's so easy, you can put it on in 5 minutes, and you can know for yourself. So again, if you're ever around us or a place like ours, we'll put one on. You can just go try it if you like it. If you can't tell, then fine, we'll take it off. But I think it's a huge thing. It requires no maintenance. You put it on one time, and you get to enjoy it the whole life of the bike. It's actually a killer deal for the money. At this point, we actually really only recommend one brand, and that's the Kuryakin one. It's 5 pieces. There's actually one on this front end here. I'll show you. The only real drawback to a fork brace is if it's not manufactured properly, or if it's installed improperly, it can actually make the system drag more. It can make the forks bind and create more of what we call stiction. The Kuryakin one is made in 5 pieces. There's 2 pieces that grip each top of the fork, and then a whole center plate that is loose compared to those 2. So one of the keys, whenever you have a wheel off of the bike, you want to make sure the leg is properly reinstalled on the axle, and there's a line there that you can use as a visual reference. We actually manipulate that by hand, and you'll be surprised. You can move it a couple of millimeters on the bottom of the leg. You want to have that in the middle of wherever you can move it, and that's actually the most relaxed position, and to where the fork will have the least drag. After you set that, the last thing you tighten on the fork brace is the center piece. And as long as you've done that, the bike will have, the drag won't change at all. We measure drag here, you know, actually with a tape measure. And we use this Kuryakin brace, and and no problems. We have found the super brace adds some drag, and it's about 8 millimeters with a Kuryakin brace with a properly assembled fork with grease in the seals and everything in good condition, and it'll be about 12, which is kind of unacceptable to us, so which is why we've kind of quit recommending that brand and really stuck to just this one. Goldwing wobble. Lots of things cause it, and we're about winding up here. So the Goldwing wobble, for sure, a bad loose steering head. Anything loose, a wheel bearing in a bike. And by the time tires get severely cupped and worn, they can help induce wobbles. But really one of the absolute key reasons a bike wobbles is because the front suspension is bottomed out. I'm convinced of it. So when a motorcycle has little or no suspension travel left available while it's riding down the road, then the tire is forced to become the suspension, and the wheel will track anything in the road, and it doesn't take much to induce a wobble. So we have lots of people who will attest. They come in when we properly spring the bike to restore wheel travel to it so that it's sitting at a proper height. They'll ride out of here with old worn tires, with cupped tires, and the bike will quit wobbling. And we've had that happen dozens of times. And so I'm absolutely convinced that the key reason of wing wobbles is that the bike's riding on its nose. You'll notice probably that it does it worse if you stay in a low gear while you're decelerating. It's the 45 to 35 area. If you shift up into top gear and do the same decel, the wobble won't be as bad. And that's another key sign that, when you're using engine braking, when you feel your bike using a low gear to slow the bike down, it loads the nose of the bike down, and it just pushes it harder. So if you're, again, riding on stock suspension, it's loading the tire, and then the tire looks for any excuse to start wobbling. And by restoring effective wheel travel to the bike, you won't do that anymore. So we've had extremely good luck fixing that. Fork brace does nothing to cure wobbles. If your bike's wobbling, somebody tells you put a fork brace on to cure that, it has nothing to do with that, and it won't cure it. So a lot of people have good luck changing steering head bearings. That's a key one. And a lot of times it's, truthfully, you could put back what was there and torque it properly and put it together right, like it left the factory, and it probably would be okay. But it seems to be an infinite combination of things that makes a Goldwing wobble. And we're trying to collect as much data on that as possible. But we have a 99% success rate of not having wings wobble. And we've had one or two that torture us and keep us looking for the answers to stop them all from wobbling. The good news is about that effect with that bike. If it wobbles, just stick your hand on it, it stops. It's strange. A Goldwing will wobble violently. And you can stick your hand on it and it'll stop. I mean, almost any other motorcycle I know of, by the time that bar is going like that, you're not going to stop it. You're going to crash. And anybody have questions out there? I can covered everything. What you got?
I can't remember what you called it, the sleeve
Mm-hmm.
that you put in
Mm-hmm.
to stop the friction between the spring and
Yeah.
the
Mm-hmm.
tube.
Yep.
Does that ever need to be replaced?
We.
Because that is your wear.
Yeah, we've never. You want to give me one, Mike? You throw me a buffer. We've not yet seen one. And long before this product, we crossed it into Goldwings. This stuff is born and bred for racing use. It's the highest quality stuff you can put in a race bike. And so part of what we do in racing is endurance racing. And people do a series here in the USA from an organization called WERA, and they run 6 and 8 hour endurance races, and they just put people on the bike, and the bike runs and it never stops, where it goes and goes and goes for 8 hours. And they do that 15, 20 times a year. And so that's like our torture test. It's more grueling than anything you're going to do to a Goldwing. And we found absolutely no wear with that part. And but if it did, it's actually really inexpensive. This is the buffer. This guide. And it goes over the rod and sits in the spring to guide it. So as the fork's compressing, this thing stops the spring from bowing left and right out onto the tube. So, but I put it in the top of the fork, right? So the rod isn't moving through the middle of it. It's fixed on the rod, and you're actually only seeing the coils only move a little bit. Each coil only moves a little bit all the way through the whole stroke. So there's actually not like a big dramatic scraping motion on it, and it's a hard ABS plastic.
What did you say your oil recommendation is?
20,000 miles.
20,000.
And we're more and more confident with that. In particular, again, we had Jamie's bike, 17,000. That was a brand new 06 bike, and bushings were worn at a little over 17. And we expect to see that. I will tell you, we're working on making our a whole shock for ourselves. We can sort of start letting the cat out of the bag. We're going to make a whole shock that'll still use the stock preload adjuster. I'm working in conjunction with Penske Racing Shocks to develop a Traxxion Dynamics brand-specific shock for the GL1800. And Penske Racing Shocks is one of the absolute premier manufacturers of suspension components in the world. They're a company we've done a lot to model ourselves after. They've won Formula One World Auto Racing Championships and NASCAR and everything in the world. And so we're closely allied with them. We're the largest Penske Racing Shock dealer in the world. And so we're very closely allied with them, and we have a great business relationship. And so it makes sense to call them in to help us come up with a shock. So that's what we're hoping for. It's going to be, we're taking our dyno graphs, everything we've derived from building this shock, which works great by everyone's account, and we're just going to put all that stuff into a unit that we can package and put in a box and sell to you. And the added bonus to our shock when we actually have the Traxxion shock will be that we're going to be able to tailor the length a little more for shorter people, or if there's actually some people who like their bikes to handle more aggressively, we can raise it a little bit. We're going to be able to raise it or lower it easily about 3 millimeters in either direction, or we can internally lower it another 3. So we could lower it a total of about 6 millimeters. And the ratio on the gull, that's about 1/4 of an inch. The ratio on the gull wing is 2.5 to 1 at the rear axle. So if we can lower it 1/4 of an inch, you'll get a little over 1/2 inch of drop at the seat height, if you're inseam challenged rider. So appreciate all your questions. Appreciate everyone being here. For those of you who are going to get this DVD in the mail, we've got a whole staff of people here. Love to help you. But visit all the information is available on our website at www.traxxion.com, and 2 X's. And we look forward to helping meet your needs with your Gold Wings now and into the future. So thank you. All right. Yeah. Thanks.